A gun pointed directly at my daughter's face. That was the moment everything changed. The porch light caught the chrome of the weapon, and for a split second, time froze. My instincts as a father screamed louder than any protocol I'd followed in 3 decades of diplomacy. And yet, the man holding that weapon wasn't a burglar, not a rogue criminal. It was our HOAS security guard, authorized, licensed by the board, and standing there like he was the law. But here's the twist. What he didn't know was that my daughter isn't just some college grad with attitude. She's a tactical commander for the FBI, trained to dismantle drug empires and unravel multi-million-dollar criminal networks. And he just declared war on the wrong woman. They say gated communities are for the peaceful. They tell you the fences are to keep danger out. But sometimes the real danger is already inside, wearing a badge they gave themselves. You think you're buying into a neighborhood, but you're actually stepping into a dictatorship wrapped in vinyl siding and perfectly trimmed lawns. You want to know the truth about these HOAs, the ones who think they own the streets you paid for? Let me take you into a war zone where the battlefield is bureaucracy. The soldiers are former cops with an axe to grind, and the first casualty, is your freedom. My name's Michael Johnson, retired diplomatic officer. 30 years navigating backroom deals with warlords and oligarchs across the globe. But none of that prepared me for the iron-fisted rule of a petty tyrant named Robert Thompson, HOA, president of Lakeside Pines. My daughter came home for a few weeks of rest. Instead, she walked straight into a neighborhood under siege. That gun? It was just the beginning. What followed was surveillance, financial corruption, public humiliation, psychological warfare, eventually an uprising, because when the wrong person is pushed too far, all it takes is one truth. To burn the whole house down? Now listen closely. This story isn't just about a single incident, it's about what happens when unchecked power meets the wrong kind of silence. I'm going to show you how they tried to break us, and how my daughter, trained by the Bureau and sharpened by war, decided to break them first. Let me pull back the curtain, because what you think you know about suburban safety, it's a lie. And tonight, that lie ends it started, with a knock on the door the morning after the incident. Calm, casual, calculated, standing there like a corporate mannequin was Robert Thompson, himself HOA president, tyrant in khakis, and the man who believed his laminated rulebook held more weight than federal law. Behind him, his perfectly styled wife, Sarah, all pearls and passive aggression. Scanned our porch like it didn't meet her personal aesthetic standards in his hand. A formal warning letter, neatly printed, professionally formatted, and soaked. In arrogance, Mr. Johnson, he began, as if we were about to discuss landscaping tips over lemonade. We need to address last night's unfortunate incident. That phrase unfortunate incident landed like acid on my skin. My daughter had a loaded weapon pointed at her face by an unlicensed thug with a god complex, and he was packaging it as a procedural hiccup. What he didn't expect was Amy stepping forward, calm, focused, unshakable. She spoke with the authority of someone who's taken down arms dealers in Eastern Europe and negotiated hostage releases in Jakarta. Mr. Thompson, she said, your guard pointed a weapon at a federal officer. That's a felony, not a footnote, he stammered. Sarah twitched. But the message was clear. We weren't playing their game. We were rewriting the rules. Now, here's what you need to understand. Dan, this is where the rot begins to show. HOA boards like this aren't built to serve the community. They're built to control it. And control is addictive. They justify it with words like order, appearance, property value, but peel back that polished veneer and what you find is a structure designed for intimidation. A fake kingdom ruled by real egos. Amy didn't need a gun to fight back. She had something far more dangerous: intelligence, access, and the cold precision of someone trained to dismantle power from the inside. That night, over cold tea and the distant hum of sprinklers, she started her investigation. She wanted to understand what kind of people turn security into surveillance. What kind of men hire disgraced cops and pay them with money no one can trace. And what kind of HOA president believes he's untouchable until someone like Amy knocks on the door. Asterisk, the deeper Amy dug, the uglier it got. On the surface, Lakeside Pines was a postcard manicured lawns, quiet streets, and a glossy brochure that promised exclusive tranquility. But tranquility enforced by fear isn't pie seats a prison with prettier landscaping and prisons. Amy's broken into worse to bring warlords to justice. Curtis Wilson, the head of HOA security, was no mystery to her. A former cop kicked off the force for excessive violence, now hiding behind a badge he didn't earn and a paycheck that smelled like a bribe. Amy didn't just see a man with a gun, she saw a walking liability, a paper trail in human form. And that trail, it led straight to Robert Thompson. She started tracing financial records. The HOA's books were bloated with vague line items, infrastructure improvements, advanced patrol expenses, consulting services. But when Amy cross-referenced those with actual community projects, nothing matched. Not one curb had been replaced. Not one camera had been upgraded. And yet, the spending was through the roof. Then came the names. Curtis Wilson wasn't employed by a legitimate firm. He was subcontracted through a shell company registered under Roberts. That's how they laundered it, paying inflated fees for security services to a company that didn't exist before Robert took office. A classic embezzlement move, hidden behind false invoices and HOA jargon. But here's where it gets more sinister. Amy wasn't just watching the numbers, she was watching the people. The neighbors who used to smile now avoided eye contact. The woman across the street who suddenly stopped her morning walks. The friendly dad who used to wave but now looked away when Curtis parked across from our driveway for hours at a time. And then there was Linda Peterson. She came to our door with a pie and left with a secret. A retired schoolteacher and a quiet rebel. She'd seen it all: the fines, the threats, the subtle punishments for non-compliance. She told us about secret board meetings, closed-door votes, and residents who mysteriously lost their privileges after speaking up. Her voice trembled, but not from fear, from finally being heard. Amy listened. She didn't promise revenge. She promised something more dangerous: transparency. Because when power fears the light, the most radical thing you can do is turn it on. And Amy? She wasn't done digging. She was just getting started. Asterisk, by the fourth day, Curtis Wilson wasn't just patrolling, he was prowling. His squad car loitered near our house like a predator marking territory, the engine running, eyes fixed on our windows. It wasn't about safety anymore. It was about sending a message: we see you, and we want you gone. But intimidation is a blunt tool, and Amy doesn't rattle easily. While Curtis played soldier outside, she was inside building a war room. She highlighted every contradiction, every unlawful policy, every loophole large enough to drive a federal audit through. And then she made a call. Jessica Miller, she said to me, HOA board member, lawyer, and based on her reaction at the grocery store, someone who knows something's wrong. Turns out, Amy was right. Jessica had been quietly compiling her own file photocopies of unapproved contracts, budget discrepancies, emails that didn't match official meeting minutes. She had the puzzle pieces, but no one to assemble them. Until Amy, over coffee. Jessica leaned in and whispered what we'd already suspected. Robert and Sarah are running this HOA like it's their private cartel. People are afraid to speak, because anyone who pushes back gets buried in violations. That same day, Amy's old colleague Marcus Reed arrived. FBI Financial Crimes Division currently on leave, but one phone call from Amy was all it took. He reviewed Jessica's files with a forensic accountant's gaze, nodding grimly. There's fraud here, he said, possibly racketeering. This isn't just about mismanagement. This is criminal. Meanwhile, the HOA turned up the heat. That afternoon, we received 6 separate violations. One claimed our trash bin lid was ajar. Another said the porch light was too warm-toned in hue. They even cited our American flag for improper night illumination. It was cartoonish if it weren't real. Still, Amy stayed 2 steps ahead. She installed hidden surveillance cameras tucked behind gutter drains, nestled in garden planters. They caught everything, including Curtis and his cronies conducting a midnight inspection. Measuring the height of our grass with flashlights at 3 a.m., the recordings were time-stamped, high-res, and legally admissible. People don't understand about modern warfare, Amy said. It doesn't always happen in war zones. Sometimes it happens in neighborhoods, in emails, in spreadsheets, in the spaces where no one's watching because they assume no one cares. But someone was watching now, and she cared more than anyone expected. The Thompson regime didn't realize it yet, but the tide had already turned. They were still operating like petty monarchs, using fear as leverage and paperwork as punishment. But Amy was orchestrating something far more dangerous than resistance. She was building a case. That night, I watched her work from across the kitchen table, her face illuminated by the bluish glow of her laptop. Charts, financial ledgers, HOA bylaws, contractor invoices, her screen looked more like a war map than a spreadsheet. She was connecting dots that no one had dared to look for. "Dad," she said quietly, "this isn't just mismanagement, it's a coordinated funnel of HOA funds into private interests. Curtis's security salary is double the state average. And the security firm, it doesn't even exist outside of Lakeside Pines. It's registered to a P.O. box in Nevada, and the listed CEO is Robert Thompson's cousin." She paused, eyes narrowing. As she opened another file, they've created a closed loop. The HOA approves contracts, pays the firm, and the firm launders the funds back to the Thompsons through family-owned LLCs. It's textbook fraud. I was stunned. I'd negotiated ceasefires in war zones. I'd stood in embassy back rooms and watched ministers launder millions. But I never expected to see the same corruption under a red-tiled roof in suburban Connecticut. And then came Linda. Again, tears in her eyes, trembling hands. Sarah Thompson had cornered her at the community center and delivered a threat so cold it made my blood run colder than it had. When I saw that gun pointed at Amy, "If you don't stop associating with the Johnsons," Sarah had told her, "we'll make sure your grandchildren can't visit anymore." That's the kind of power they thought they had, the power to weaponize love. To turn grandparents into prisoners of fear, to isolate us by punishing those who cared. Amy didn't blink. She knelt beside Linda and said with quiet steel, "You don't owe us anything, but I promise you this ends soon." And I believed her, because she wasn't just collecting evidence, she was watching their patterns, their meetings, their reactions. She had cameras on the Thompson house, recording David Clark HOA treasurers sneaking in with armfuls of files. Curtis arrived 30 minutes later. They were panicking, scrambling. They thought they still had control, but they didn't realize the most dangerous weapon in this war wasn't Amy's badge. It was her patience. A week later, the storm hit, but it didn't come from the sky. It came from behind a podium at the annual HOA meeting. The room was dressed in pretense, folding chairs in perfect rows, tables lined with stale cookies, and the Thompson dynasty seated at the front like royalty. Robert in his starched polo, Sarah clinging to her wineglass like a scepter, and Curtis looming behind them, arms folded like a human barricade. Amy and I were placed in the back row, deliberately. A power play so predictable, it was laughable. But Amy wasn't here to play checkers. She was setting up a chessboard, and every piece was already in motion. Jessica Miller sat 3 rows ahead, scanning the crowd with the practiced caution of someone used to secrets. Linda Peterson arrived late, taking her seat with trembling courage, and Marcus Emmy's forensic ace was leaning against the sidewall, silent, invisible, unnoticed, exactly as planned. Robert started the meeting with a puffed-up speech about community values and preserving standards. It was theater. He even made a jab about outside interference from individuals who don't understand how we do things here. The crowd laughed nervously. Then came the financial report, delivered by David Clark, the treasurer. It was vague, evasive, pages of platitudes and generalities. No itemized budgets, no contractor names, just the phrase security expenditures increased due to heightened threat levels. That's when Amy stood up. "Mr. Clark," she said calmly, "you clarify what specific threats justified a 30% increase in security spending over the past year." A pause, heads turned. Murmurs rippled through the room. Robert interjected, "Ms. Johnson, this is not the time or place for interrogation. Our board has approved all measures necessary to ensure safety." But Amy wasn't addressing him. She was locked onto David. "And can you explain why the contractor receiving those funds shares a mailing address with your HOA president's brother-in-law?" Gasps. Audible ones. Jessica stood next. "I'm on the board," she said evenly. "I've never seen a single invoice from that contractor, nor have I approved any disbursement of those amounts." Robert's mask slipped. "This is nonsense. Manufactured drama from a troublemaker who..." And then Marcus stepped forward. No badge, no announcement, just a folder and a calm voice. My name is Marcus Reed. I'm a financial crimes investigator. And the evidence in this folder suggests multiple violations of federal and state laws. Embezzlement, fraud, illegal contracting practices, silence. The entire room held its breath. Amy crossed her arms. You wanted protocol, Mr. Thompson. Here it is. That's when Curtis stepped forward, hand twitching near his belt. But this time, nobody backed down, especially not Amy. Curtis's eyes darted across the room, calculating, cornered. His fingers hovered too close to his hip, near the holster. He wore like a badge of honor. But there was no authority left behind it. Only panic. Amy didn't flinch. Her voice cut through the tension like a scalpel. Don't. That one word, measured, unshaken, landed, like a command, not a request. Curtis froze, because somewhere, deep down, even he knew, if he so much as twitched wrong, he wouldn't be facing an HOA complaint. He'd be facing federal charges and headlines on the 6 o'clock news. Marcus calmly stepped between them, holding the folder like a weapon. It's over, gentlemen. We have financial records, video surveillance, witness testimony. This isn't going to be buried in some neighborhood newsletter. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, like a spell breaking, people began whispering. Heads turned. Eyes locked on Robert Thompson, who sat paralyzed in his chair, mouth open, confidence draining from his face like water through a sieve. Sarah gripped his arm. Do something, she hissed. But Robert had nothing left. No more rules to hide behind, no more guards to send, no more smirks, no more veiled threats. Just the realization that the kingdom he built on HOA fees and fear had just been ripped from under him. By the one thing he never accounted for, someone smarter, braver, and better connected. Amy walked toward the front. Slow, deliberate. She wasn't gloating, she was dismantling. She laid down the printed copies of Curtis's employment records, fake company names, overpaid contracts, illegally awarded bids. Then came the surveillance, screenshots Curtis and his men trespassing on private property at 3 a.m., flashlights in hand, tape measures like weapons. Every document is time-stamped. Every photo geotagged, she said, locking eyes with the crowd. This isn't about one man with a gun. It's about a system that enabled him. You were all forced to fund your own oppression, and in that moment the room turned. Who had avoided us suddenly stood. Quiet faces raised their voices. People who had feared fines, exclusion, punishment finally realized the emperor had no clothes, and the sword of authority was paper-thin. Jessica Miller walked to the front and addressed the board. Her voice clear, effective immediately. I motion to suspend the president, the treasurer, and all contracted security pending a full legal audit. Seconded, voted, passed, just like that. The house of cards collapsed, not with gunfire, not with shouting, with truth, and a woman who refused to flinch. The aftermath didn't come as an explosion, it came like a quiet purge. One by one, the layers of Robert Thompson's empire peeled away, each revealing just how deep the rot had spread. That same night, Jessica filed an official report with the state attorney general's office. Marcus compiled and submitted the forensic audit, backed by hours of surveillance footage and 5 years of suspicious bank transfers. And Amy, she didn't celebrate. She got back to work. You don't kill a snake by cutting off the tail, she said. You go for the head end, then you burn the nest. Curtis Wilson disappeared first. No resignation letter, no farewell speech, just gone. His patrol vehicle abandoned outside the community center, key still in the ignition. We later found out he tried to apply for a security job to towns over. Didn't even make it to the interview once. His name was flagged in the investigation. Clark, the treasurer, broke next. Faced with the threat of felony charges and financial ruin, he flipped faster than anyone expected. He handed over private email chains between him and Robert two males, detailing kickbacks, fake invoices, and internal memos suggesting how to pressure resistant homeowners into compliance through fines and security presence. But the crown jewel, a spreadsheet, hidden inside a folder labeled innocuously as Q4_community_plan.xlsx. It wasn't a plan. It was a payoff list. Every resident who had been fined unjustly, every board member who had been bribed into silence, Every contractor who'd sent a fake invoice and received a real payment. Names, dates, amounts. It was everything, and Amy had it in her hands. Meanwhile, residents once too afraid to speak now knocked on our door, thanking her, offering stories, bringing pies, documents, even receipts of violations they had been to. Ashamed to fight, Linda Peterson arrived with a box of handwritten notes records she had kept secretly for 3 years. "I knew it was wrong," she whispered, "but I never thought anyone would listen." They were listening now, Robert and Sarah, still in denial. For days, they strutted around like nothing had changed, but the calls stopped. The allies vanished. By the end of the week, Sarah stood alone at the mailbox, clutching a legal notice from the State Board of Homeowners Associations. Her hands shook. Amy watched from the window. "Fear's a funny thing," she said. "When it's yours, it feels like control. When it's turned back on you, it feels like truth." And Robert, he was about to find out how heavy the truth really was. By Monday morning, the silence around the Thompson estate was deafening. No golf cart, no HOA walkthrough, no patrol car idling outside our driveway. Just the sound of the truth tightening its grip, one subpoena at a time. That day, Robert received a certified letter, not a HOA memo, a federal summons. Amy stood in the foyer when it arrived, arms crossed, gaze locked through the blinds as the courier handed it off. "That," she said flatly, "is the beginning of the end." What followed was a domino collapse. The state launched a formal investigation into Lakeside Pines' HOA finances. The media caught wind after someone anonymously leaked the spreadsheet. Local news ran it under the headline, "Power, Privilege, and the Price of Silence in Lakeside Pines." Suddenly, every resident had an opinion. Suddenly, everyone who'd once whispered was shouting, and still, Amy kept digging. Because here's what most people miss. Corruption doesn't just vanish, it burrows. It finds new hosts, new masks. Amy wasn't just cutting off a tumor, she was sterilizing the wound. She uncovered a pattern of property manipulation. Robert had used shell companies to purchase undervalued homes within the community, issued fake citations to drive down there. Market value then graciously offered to buy them at a discount, flipping power into profit. But that wasn't the worst of it. Behind the curtain of this HOA empire, Amy found something darker, a slush fund disguised as community enrichment. It was funded directly by increased homeowner fees and used not for parks or maintenance, but for private events, travel expenses, and untraceable cash withdrawals. The deeper she looked, the more it screamed organized fraud. And when Marcus cross-referenced those withdrawals with dates, they matched trips Sarah Thompson had taken to community conferences in Napa, New York, and once Paris, all paid for by residents under the pretense of neighborhood development. Amy built a case so tight, it squeaked. With Marcus's help, she packaged everything and handed it off to the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Division. Not because she wanted revenge, because she demanded accountability. And that night, as we stood on the porch under the sharp autumn stars, she said something I'll never forget. "People think tyranny only exists in dictatorships. But give the wrong person a clipboard and a little unchecked authority and you'll find oppression growing right on your front lawn." The HOA was crumbling, but Amy wasn't done, because justice doesn't end when the guilty fall. It ends when the people remember how to stand. The final act didn't unfold with sirens or arrests, not yet. That's not how power dies in places like this. In gated communities, it doesn't fall with violence. It falls with whispers turning into voices, with silence replaced by questions, with fear cracking into defiance, and Amy lit every match that made that fire possible. 3 weeks after the HOA meeting, a full audit of Lakeside Pines was launched. Not internal, not polite, federal. Jessica Miller, newly appointed interim HOA president, stood on our porch that morning with a stack of legal documents and a quiet apology. "For what?" Amy asked. "For not acting sooner," Jessica replied. The entire board had been dissolved by emergency vote. Robert and Sarah, gone. Their estate sat dark, the curtains drawn, their vehicles missing. Rumor had it they fled to a cousin's ranch in Montana far from subpoenas, news crews, and the residents they used to rule. Curtis, officially disqualified from ever working in any security role in the state again. A quiet civil suit was brewing, from multiple homeowners, some citing emotional trauma, others naming financial damages. Amy offered assistance to every one of them, connecting them with legal help and drafting affidavits. And Linda, she stood tall again, invited us for dinner. The following Sunday, no fear in her voice, just the calm steadiness of someone who had survived the storm and could finally breathe. But it was more than just retribution. Amy rewrote the HOA bylaws meticulously, with community approval, legal clarity, and transparency built into every clause. No one would ever again wield a clipboard like a cudgel in this neighborhood. No more phantom fines. No more 3 a.m. inspections. No more backdoor embezzlement cloaked in protocol. The new HOA was built on consent, accountability, respect, and Amy. She never once asked for thanks. Her work done, she packed her duffel. She had a flight to DCA briefing with the Bureau about another case involving offshore accounts and political shell games. Bigger fish, bigger stakes. As we stood at the airport gate, I said, "You could have left this alone, stayed out of it, let them run their little kingdom." She smiled and let them point guns at other people's daughters. Then, softer, "You taught me diplomacy, Dad. But some people don't deserve negotiation. Some people only understand strength." She hugged me, turned, and disappeared into the crowd. That was months ago. The HOA never recovered, but the community healed. They planted flowers, built a new playground, even held a block party, first one in years. And every time someone asks how it all changed, I point to the security camera still hidden in our porch light, and I say, because one man drew a gun on the wrong daughter, and she never blinked. Asterisk if you believe in standing your ground. If you believe that no one, no matter how powerful, gets to bully their way through life unchecked, then hit that subscribe button. Because on this channel, we don't just tell stories, we expose systems. We reveal the tactics they don't want you to know. And we remind you you're not alone in this fight.